Welcome to the campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Good afternoon. Today our topic is job power for women. In order to deal with this very important subject, we want to welcome to our program, and it's a very special privilege, to welcome Ellen Perry, who is a noted career development specialist and outplacement consultant, and she serves as vice president of the career development team from New York City. She conducts intensive workshops on entering the job market, upward mobility, and job changing. She's also known for her lectures on the topic that we're dealing with, job power for women. She is at the present time collaborating with Tom Jackson from New York City on a book that will deal with the subject of people's work relationship in the 1980s. Ellen Perry holds a master's degree in psychology and theater from Stanford University. She has been an inner-city social worker in her native St. Louis as well as Southeast Bronx. Formerly, she was also an advertising executive in Manhattan. Ellen, welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I'm also happy to welcome to the program three panel members. First of all is regular panelist Janelle Burke, holding baccalaureate and master's degrees from the College of Idaho and Indiana University. And for the first time, we're very delighted to welcome to our program Betty McLean to serve on the panel. She chairs the Division of Business at North Idaho College. And returning, and he's been with us several times before, is James Burns, who chairs the Division of Life Sciences at North Idaho College. Welcome, panel.
Thank you,
Nice
Tony.
to be here.
We'll proceed to questions at once, and the first series will come from Janelle Burke.
If I were a woman thinking about entering the job market, what steps would you recommend that I follow? Plunging right in, what steps would you recommend that I follow in my thought processes in order to prepare myself? Briefly.
First thing you want to do, Janelle, is inventory your skills and abilities. Make a list of the problems that you can solve, look at the things that you're interested in, and then put them together and say, what particular job targets or directions could I go in from those skills and abilities? They're not necessarily related to your past work life. They're not necessarily related to your degree. Just look at all the problems you can solve. Particularly for a woman, look at the things that you do in your volunteer time. Look at all the things that you do that are really problem solving. Then put them together with things that interest you, and that gives you a direction to go in. That's the first thing you must do.
Okay. Another step?
Yeah.
The second one.
Second step is to then research. Who are the employers that would hire me? Knowing that I have this particular skill and this interest, and I put them together, now who are the people in my geographic area who would hire me? You wouldn't look at just advertised jobs. You'd look at all possible employers in that job target area as people who are potential employers for you. That's called job market research. You could also do something which we call networking, which is to call people in a professional area where you have an interest and set up an informal information interview. Especially this is valuable for women, so that you find out, you can begin to establish role model women, that you can find out how they got to be where they are, how they came up the ladder, how they got the salary they did, and you'd be surprised at the techniques that they used.
Betty McLean.
Thank you, Tony. I'm interested in the women that you've trained at Women's School in New York. From the standpoint, if you could elaborate a bit on, I know a good part of your theory is to give them a feeling of self-worth,
Yes.
improve their self-image. Could you elaborate a bit on the methods that you use for that?
Yes, yeah, I will, Betty. Particularly, we have women, again, to go back to what I just gave to Janelle, we have a woman really inventory her skills and accomplishments. You take a housewife, sometimes a housewife in her volunteer time is responsible for fundraising and organizing groups, doing incredible, valuable things that she takes for granted. So one of the things that we have women do, especially housewives, people who don't have paid work experience, is focus on the value that they've produced in the world, irregardless of being paid or not. And that's a very, very important step that we did at Women's School.
Good.
Jim Burns.
Yeah, Ellen, you indicated, I heard you earlier this morning, you indicated there are a number of barriers preventing women from really reaching their potential in the workforce. and you divided those into external and internal barriers, which I didn't completely understand. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about some of the primary barriers and how they relate to external and internal barriers.
Yes, an external barrier would be something that comes from the outside of you. Like, for example, an external barrier would be the lack of understanding or compassion that men might have. In other words, that women might say, well, I can't, a man's problem is not my problem. That there are, in fact, real prejudices that men have. There are industries, as someone indicated this morning, where there are physical barriers that women have. They wouldn't put women on a heavy industrial job and so forth. Those are external barriers, which are things that are going to come back to the woman, objections that she's going to get. That's one set of barriers. The internal barriers are the things which a woman comes right from within her, that if she could press through, she could be more active in the job market. That's things like low self-image, fears about her age, problems with competition with her husband, things like that, things that come, internal psychological barriers which she has to overcome before she can meet the external barriers.
Also, along that line, you hear a lot about sexual harassment now, and that I'm sure that there are some women in the work field who would use their sexuality to promote themselves. Do you find, or do you believe that possibly a excellent-looking woman, a very good-looking woman, that could actually be a barrier to her, too, in achieving her potential? I mean, in other words, you could maybe be possibly too good-looking. Would that be a barrier?
Well, again, not necessarily unless you dress yourself in such a way that it entices people, so that you have to be your mind has to be bigger than your own barrier. It has to be big enough to include the barrier of the person across the desk from you. So that if you wear a certain kind of silk blouse and long dangling earrings, that it's going to evoke a certain image in the mind of a potential employer, especially a male, then you say, yes, I know I'm good looking, and I'm going to wear a different kind of blouse and a shorter stubby earring, and I'm going to look as good as I can, but I'm not going to be inappropriate. I'm not going to look like I belong at a cocktail party when in fact I belong in an office.
Well, a lot of times, like I'll hear somebody say, well, how come she got that job? And I'll say, well, she had the best-looking legs of everybody that was interviewed. Well, couldn't that possibly be a barrier to that woman once she was employed in that situation? Couldn't that kind of be an inward barrier to herself, that she might begin to think that, well, maybe she was hired for that reason alone?
I frankly think that that's usually a pretty sexist statement that people say. People will say that irregardless of what the value is that the woman actually communicated. And that's point number one. And point number two is that if a woman is particularly attractive, that's obviously can be a great benefit to her. And the point is that if where you're coming from is to produce benefit and value for a potential employer, everything else about you falls in line. In other words, you could be kind of unattractive too. But if who you are is a person who contributes to the workforce, who gets the job done, that's the thing that people will start to notice. A woman cannot get stuck back in her physical appearance, pro or con, that who she is someone who contributes to the organization, working to the problems being solved within the organization, and that's what gives her power, not her looks.
One more quick question and I'll quit. Is sexual harassment a reality in the women's work field?
Yes, it is.
I would like to go back to what Betty was discussing with you. I believe she was the panel member that did that. And that is that if a woman is really being successful at, as you indicated this morning, fundraising, maybe it's a charitable thing, or in a particular important position she's received, she becomes so successful that she becomes almost apologetic, whereas in our cultural value system, men are praised highly if they are aggressive and are successful with that aggression. I really have a two-part question. First of all, do you see this changing in our society? And if so, is it rather rapidly changing? And if not, what needs to be done in the society? Is it an individual thing, or can we make some public policy decisions that will affect the change to where we can use creativity wherever it is and encourage it to make our society better?
All right, question number one, is it changing? Yes, slowly. Women are being the more women get together and work in groups and see that the only way they're going to make it is to acknowledge their value and blow their own horn, if you will, then that's the way that people are going to sit up and notice that in fact they deserve the credit where the credit is due. To answer question number two, I don't think we can legislate that. I think that that's something, just as as the women's movement, as I said this morning, as the women's movement has hit us, less militant types, but in fact who now identify with saying, well, yes, I'm a feminist, because it's safe enough now for all of us to say, yes, I can step out and ask for some of my rights. It didn't all come out of legislation. It came out of consciousness, came out of the seepage through into the consciousness of women across the country that we deserve to stand up for ourselves and ask for more of what we want. And I think that wave is happening in the country, and I don't think any amount of legislation can actually turn around the internal self-image of a woman. That will happen, though.
But if you do get such things as the ERA
Yes.
in the Constitution, it opens up an opportunity that might not be there.
Oh, yeah.
That once that opportunity is there and then the action takes place, that would reinforce certain internal feelings, would it not, or prove certain points?
I think so, but we can't wait for that.
Yes.
We can't say, well, as soon as the ERA's passed, then I can stand up for my rights. You know, it's really up to us individually to say, I know who I am, I know I have value, I'm going to give it to people, and I'm going to make sure that they know it, and I'm going to make the work world work for myself as an individual, and I happen to be a woman.
Yes. Janelle Berg.
I would like to ask a question about the non-traditional job fields. First of all, are women actually gaining access to these non-traditional job fields? And then secondly, what are the most popular ones, or what are those that the women seem to have had the most success at?
Women are having, yes, women do have access to non-traditional work fields, and women are beginning to break through in industry more and more. We just finished working with rubber and tire company with retraining people to go back into the job market. And there were women who were tire builders among the people that we met. And even at North Idaho, I noticed that there was a student, young woman welder who was in with us yesterday. So that there are more and more women breaking through into physical industry, into the physical labor market. And I think that they're becoming more and more acceptable there. Also in the media, of course, women have always been accepted, but I notice even our television crew here is women, and all over the country where I've been, even in some major studios, I see more and more women. This is almost going to be a sexist statement, manning cameras. I see women on camera and behind the cameras, and I see that is definitely a field where women are breaking through as well.
In the professional fields, do you find the same kind of breakthrough?
Yes, I do. Even 10 years ago when I was at Stanford, the degree of women in 1968 when I was graduating, there was about 25 to 30% of the law students there were women. And I've heard statistically that it's up closer to 50% now. Also in the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, which is one of the best schools in the country in terms of business, much higher degree of women in the past 10 years since I've left there than there was before.
I cannot resist putting this footnote in at the time because our viewing audience cannot see this. Not only do we have both of our regular panelists that are women, and our visiting panel members oftentimes a man. Of our 3 cameramen, 2 are women today, and our executive producer, Pat Richard, is a woman, so we certainly are well represented in the communications division here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've joined our program in progress, our guest is Ellen Perry, who is an expert and a consultant on job outplacement and also job promotion and so forth. She's from New York City, and we shall continue the questioning with Betty McLean.
Ellen, I think the viewers would be interested in some of what you had to say in today and Tom Jackson yesterday in regard to the training that you're giving when asked by industry or corporations for people that are to be released from their occupation, what you do to get them back into the job market.
Good, Betty, thank you. What we do is it's traditionally been called outplacement, and we have renamed it career continuation because in fact we don't place people in jobs. We assist them in re-entering the job market, all people, men and women, going back into the job market and getting themselves jobs again, and actually getting themselves more satisfying jobs. So what we do is we usually go into a company and we design a program where we give them a full-day workshop and we cover everything step by step, from knowing yourself, your skills and abilities, job targeting, through the hidden job market, how to uncover unadvertised jobs, into effective resume writing, good interviewing, and salary negotiation, always within the context of that who you are is the one that makes the difference, that you must have some understanding of yourself, your skills and abilities, that there are a number of jobs that you can do in the world, that even if your job becomes obsolete, that there's always something else that you can do. It comes, basically what we do comes out of the human potential, human resource, consciousness thinking, and that we push people in the direction of choosing to do what they want to do in life and making that a career.
How about a couple of quick do's or don'ts on resume writing?
Oh, good, my favorite subject. Do keep your resume to one page. Do eliminate extraneous information. In other words, you don't need things on there like your height, weight, health, and marital status, things like that. Those things go onto an application, and it will be visible to an employer when you're talking to them. Use action words on your resume: delivered, saved money, coordinated, organized, words like that that create a quick picture in the mind of the employer. Put your accomplishments down, not your duties. Select a format that works. The chronological format, which is popular, most people are familiar with that, is not necessarily the one that's appropriate for you. For example, if a woman is re-entering the job market, she might want to have a functional format where she would organize her accomplishments and skills by function or category, so that some fundraising could be under a category called money management or financial development. She could actually have that, and even though it was not a paying job, she could put that in her resume.
Jim Burns.
And back to what Janelle was discussing with you, how do you get a woman to change her self-image? For instance, in the life sciences, I come in contact with a lot of young women who are going into the medical profession. And they always look at the paramedical area, and I ask them, why do you want to be a dental assistant or a dental hygiene? Why not be a dentist? Now, in nursing, you have a lot of men that become nurses. Why don't we have more women picking the medical profession, the professional areas of becoming dentists? How do you, they seem to think in the direction of being a dental hygienist rather than thinking of being a dentist. Can you get them to change that self-image? Is that part of their, how they've grown up, or they've been taught, or what do you do about it?
That's part of it, Jim. Part of it's self-image, and also part of it is family management. How can you have a woman who can be, who is fortunate enough or can work it out for herself so that she can manage a family, a married life, and have the kind of career that demands that much of her? So it's not all self-image. A lot of it is that a woman has so much more to balance in her life than just a career. So if you get a woman who can be a doctor and can be a lawyer, you better believe she has a marriage that's set up in such a way, if she's married at all, that she has it set up in such a way that she can have all the other things. We have a lot more issues to cover as women than men do. Now, that number one, it's not always self-image, and number two, it's still going to take a lot for us to penetrate into the minds of women in terms of self-image, that you can, in fact, attempt to manage all those things at once. And one of the things that we do, one of the exercises we do, is a thing called positive statements, where we get people to repeat over and over again every positive thing about themselves that they have to contribute to others until it becomes part of their thinking. Again, men so easily can talk their way into a job, and women tend to not be able to do that. So we literally rehearse women over and over again to be able to make a positive statement so it comes out of their mouths in spite of their minds.
What could a woman do if, say, she's working in a company and she's obviously being underpaid, that she's just not getting the salary that the other people in the company are, and yet she's doing the same job or even doing more, and they won't even consider it? They say, no, that's what you're getting. Is there anything that woman can do, particularly if she's in a company where there's no union or anything that has any power? What could she do?
Well, the first thing she has to do is speak up, and that is that our principle, what Tom Jackson says and that we totally avow to, is that money follows value. And sometimes, number one, is her value being seen and noticed? And if it isn't, who can notice it? And who does she need to go to tell them, look, again, it goes back to a woman's not blowing her own horn. Saying, I know women who will reorganize a department and they'll say, well, I didn't really do that, and gee, I'm underpaid. See, if that's what you did, then you've got to align the value with money. So if what you're doing is producing value and your boss isn't noticing it, and it's been a year since you've gotten a raise, you might say, I've reorganized the department, I've trained 3 people. What I'd like to do is to continue to do that and do more, and I'd like to have my salary line up with the value that I'm producing. That's rather than going in and say, I need more money and it's unfair. That's, setting up a dichotomy between yourself and the employer. Blowing your own horn, again.
At your program this morning before the students, a young man was sitting next to me, and he made a very important observation. I thought, and I'd like to get your reaction to it. He was very interested in the conversation, and the majority of the audience happened to be women, and he said he was impressed by the fact that women would speak out as they did with you, and you were very easy to talk to, but that they would speak out and tell you or tell the audience their frustrations, their feelings, and he felt that they were much better at that than an audience of men would be. And he theorized that might be because women have had more frustrations, more discrimination, more willing to talk about it. Would you agree with that conclusion?
It could be. I'd say yes and no. It could be that women have had more frustrations. It's also that we're more used to speaking up. And I'm not quite sure why, but the conditioning is such that women are, I brought this up this morning, women are freer to cry. We are a little bit more emotional, that we are more sensitive, that somewhere in society it's come up that we have more freedom to speak out and, you know, let go of our feelings and let go of our tensions. The tragedy I'll just send it into another subject a little bit. One of the tragedies that I've noticed is that women trying to become like men in the workforce are now picking up all the tragic symptoms of men. That the alcoholism rate in women is higher, that, you know, colitis and all these other problems are coming up as real issues for women, and they're all stress items. Now there's stress workshops for the working woman, and it means that she's, you know, becoming just like a man, going into the work world and going under the same stress and strain. And I think that's too bad. I want women to just continue to be who they are and have the free flow of who they are be what they put into the work world.
Janelle Burke.
Please define upward mobility for our viewers and talk about steps that can be taken to help a person become upwardly mobile.
Upward mobility is, this will be my definition, this is not out of Ms. Magazine or Germaine Greer, but upward mobility is the ability to move upward. In other words, to set up a ladder for yourself so you have some movement. Some of the steps, Janelle, would be, number one, if you go into a company, let's say at an entry level, don't stop within your department. Don't just say, well, I understand myself and my boss and the 3 people around us. Educate yourself immediately. Find out every department in there. You know, what are they doing? What's the ladder here? Where can I go? Talk to other women in the company who are successful. Before you get into the job market, do some networking. Talk to people who could be role models for yourself, who have made it, who have struggled. There are women long before the women's movement who have really made it in the work world. Find out who they are, talk to them, ask them the real questions. How did you do it? How did you manage the family? How did you climb up? How did you negotiate for salary? What did you do to make it within this company?
It seems to me that oftentimes in the upward mobility pattern, women have been promoted to lower management positions, but it's getting beyond the lower management position that is the problem. In other words, at that point, they had not properly assumed that they were going to reach another level.
Yeah.
And so they have settled for that lower management position. Or the employer says, women were not properly prepared, and therefore I will not promote anyone else to that particular position because I've had poor response in the past.
Yes.
Would you wish to comment on all of those remarks?
Well, all of those things don't have to stop you. You know, if what it's going to take for you to compete with men in moving up into middle and upper management, you know, start taking courses toward an MBA. At least demonstrate that you're going in the direction. Sit down and talk with men. Don't avoid. When I say talk to the women who have made it, you won't find that many. So sit down and talk to the men and find out. Make friends with people. Use an informal network of people to get yourself supported. I think the only tragedy is if a woman tries to make it alone. It's too hard. You really can't do it alone. You need people who trust your intelligence and will get behind you and support you and pull the strings for you. And it doesn't have to be a long-time friend. You can create a friend or create a contact for yourself within a company to keep yourself moving up.
Betty McLean.
The theme for our convocation, as you know, is the future. So I was particularly interested in the book that you're currently working on, and if you could just tell us a little bit about that. It's going to be about impact and influence of women on people's work in the 80s.
Yes, that's right. It's expanded now, and it's not strictly about women. It's really about the whole work-life revolution that's happening in the next 20 years. And it's going back, as all of Tom Jackson's works are about, and all of the things that we're working on now is that the whole shift in the context of the work world in the next 20 years is about the human resource. It's about people changing careers. The world is moving very fast with technology making things obsolete, with the oil crisis itself is affecting the work world enormously right now. And we must look at the human contribution that can be made to making the work world more satisfying, and women have an enormous opportunity right now to do that. Women have psychological insights that go way beyond men, and not that men don't have it, it's just that they're stuck in a more political fighting structure, and women are the innocents on the outside who see right into the center of things. And why aren't we speaking up? So we encourage more and more women to get into the game and speak up, not trying to be part of the game that traps men, but to be who they are as a contribution. And that's really what the book will be about.
Jim Burns.
Do you really think there's jobs that women can't do? I know in the Kellogg-Wallace area we have hard rock miners that are women. Physically, they might be able to do it a little bit different. They might do a little bit differently, but do you think there's something they shouldn't do or they can't do really as a woman?
Frankly, I don't. You know, maybe if you're 9 months pregnant, you shouldn't be lifting, you know, and doing heavy construction work. But I don't really think there's anything a woman can't do. There was a man this morning who said, well, just try 3 days, you know, on the hard rock pile and see if you could make it. And another woman put up her hand and said, my sister tried for 3 days and she got frustrated, but she stayed for 3 months and found that she could make all the physical adjustments and do it. So that's very real. And I don't really think, I don't, in my mind, have any picture of any job that a woman can't do.
Don't you suppose a lot of that frustrations come from the attitudes of the people she's working with and the psychological problems? Is there a lot of, when a woman goes into a non-traditional field, do they get a lot of flack?
Yes, they do. There was a woman I know who interviewed to be on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, and she tried to do it, and she got so much flack that basically sexual harassment, that she got so much of that the employer said, well, it's not going to work. You know, the men can't adjust to you. And they saw it as her problem, not the men's problem.
Well, they probably, if they left her alone to do her job, she would probably do the job and maybe do a little bit better by doing a little bit different way.
She could have demonstrated that she could have done the job, and then let the men, you know, absorb the upset about a good-looking woman or whatever she was being around, get them through that. In time, those things can be gotten through, and she probably would have been very successful at the job. Unfortunately, she was snatched off too early and didn't fight to stay on.
We have about 30 seconds left. I was reading a report from Michigan State University study on this subject, and they were recommending for women that one of the courses in college that they needed the best background in to move into the new potential for them in the future is in the field of mathematics. Would you agree with that?
I certainly do. I certainly do. Women have an enormous fear of mathematics. I had it myself, and I pushed myself to read bookkeeping books so that I could confront that. It's just important to know that in terms of all organizations.
I must close, and I want to thank you. It's been most informative. Thank you, panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please be with us again next week, and have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.